Welcome to CNN Talk. Brexit is back.
It's back. It's behind you.
Never going away.
But back with a real bombshell as well today. How would you describe today's events for the international audience now?
Is it a bombshell? I mean, for me, this was more like, okay, this is obviously going to happen, right? Like something was about to break. Theresa May came out yesterday, made a big speech, you know, her last kind of concessions to try and get her deal over the line. And I think it was within 30 minutes, like it was rejected by all parties of all political affiliations on all sides.
The number of rebels in her party doubled, apparently.
Well, yeah, it just keeps getting worse, right? Let's not forget that for Theresa May, like the substance of what she's trying to get through Parliament hasn't changed since the negotiations concluded in November last year. And she's been trying one way, another way, and people have voted for, against. Like, the arithmetic has never been on her side. It was never going to be on her side. So eventually she's got to go, and she will be going.
So what would the process be, Aisha, if she were to go? Because there's various sort of hoops that need to be jumped through.
Yes. So the first step is that we've just breaking, just as we've kind of been sat here, is that the 1922 committee, which kind of sort of sets quite a lot of the rules in Parliament around the Conservative MPs, they are going to have another meeting tonight where they're going to explore whether they can change the rules around when you can challenge the leader again. Viewers may remember that there was a vote of no confidence which was organised by Jacob Rees-Mogg earlier this year, actually towards the end of last year, around Christmas, which the Prime Minister actually won reasonably comfortably. I mean, it wasn't a complete slam dunk for her, but she won it pretty comfortably. The feeling is that if there was to be another vote, then she would not win that vote now. It really does feel like her colleagues in the Parliamentary Conservative Party, definitely amongst the members, have really turned against her. It feels like the final death throes of her kind of reign.
The other interesting dynamic here is because, you know, obviously one of the reasons she's been kept in office is because there hasn't been a viable alternative. But Boris Johnson finally is being seen as a viable option by the parliamentary party. Is that correct?
That's right. What we've got here for our North American friends is we've got the interplay of the European Parliament elections, in which Britain votes tomorrow. Other EU countries are voting on different days, and we'll all get the results on Sunday. This is for the European Parliament, the parliaments that oscillates between Brussels and Strasbourg. And in those European elections, in the campaigning, Nigel Farage's party has literally stormed from nowhere, and it's now in the lead. It's called the Brexit Party, and it's only a few weeks old, and it's polling at between 25 and 35 to 40%, depending on the polls that you look at. And I think that's really put the wind up, if you like, the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party, the oldest sort of continuously standing democratic party in the world, the party that specialises in being in power here in the UK, could come fifth in this election. I mean, that's where we are. This is absolutely seismic British politics. And because of that, the Tory MPs, the Tory constituency parties, the members of the party out in the shires, they are now concerned. They want to get rid of May very quickly. I think they want a more kind of Brexity leader. Whether or not the parliamentary party will let that happen or not, I don't know. And Boris Johnson was the de facto leader of the Leave campaign. And I think if they're going to have to fight populism, then the Tory party wants to fight populism with a populist. And Boris Johnson is the nearest thing that they've got to a populist.
Could you ever imagine a Remainer? I mean, you were part of the Remain campaign, weren't you? But you can't imagine a Remainer.
It's not going to be a Remain PM. There's no doubt about it. The Tory party will have a much more Brexity PM.
So
and
it makes
somebody
it Boris, though, doesn't it?
I think Rob has a good chance as well.
Brexit is back. You may or may not be pleased about that, but we're asking you the question, should the UK hold a second Brexit referendum? Because the idea of that being floated has caused all sorts of problems for Theresa May.
British Prime Minister Theresa May is offering Parliament a vote on a second public Brexit referendum.
But there's a catch. They also have to back her deal.
I have compromised. Now I ask you to compromise too. No, we can't support this bill because it's basically a rehash of what was discussed before.
It's clear what she's trying to do, win over those last 30 votes. It's not clear she's going to get them from this.
Members of the Brexit wing of her party declaring this to be an even greater mess than the deal some had reluctantly voted for previously.
It's looking increasingly likely that she will be ousted in the days to come, or that a vote of no confidence will take place.
This is Theresa May's last chance to get a Brexit withdrawal agreement through Parliament.
Move our country and our politics forward and build the better future that all of us want to see.
On Facebook, Shire says yes, absolutely and fast to a second referendum. Keith says why? It'll just be another waste of time. And Nigel says no, just vote for Farage's Brexit party. Aisha, just explain where we are, because a huge amount has happened today. The papers are all united today, the British newspapers, against Theresa May specifically, and being really, really snipey. But why has it suddenly collapsed to this point for her?
Well, we had a wee bit of a lull on Brexit, and then yesterday afternoon, the Prime Minister sort of roared back onto the stage, and she summoned all the political journalists, and she said, listen, here is a new deal that I'm offering back to British MPs. She called it a 10-point plan. And this was a big compromise move for her. She was offering people the chance of a second referendum. She was offering a bit on the customs union. She was offering to sort of go back and look at the backstop. It was a sort of a smorgasbord. And what she tried to do was she tried to offer a little bit of something to everybody, and she ended up pleasing nobody, which is kind of where we are on Brexit. Now, actually, the substance of what she's offering is not egregious, but it's way too late in the day now. The problem for the Prime Minister is if she had made this speech and if she had made this bold offer on day one of her premiership, when Brexit was such a thorny issue, we might be in a different situation now. It's dragged on for such a long time that each side has become so entrenched in their view. Everybody has doubled down on Brexit. And now people are just absolutely wanting their own thing. So she's got hardline, right-wing Eurosceptic MPs who are saying to her, we are absolutely not going to back this deal. You've got the Labour Party who are saying, no, it's too little, it's too late. And the main reason why people have really united against her is that she's redundant. She is surplus to requirements now. Nobody is looking to her with any authority. They are looking to the next leader of the Conservative Party. They're looking to Boris Johnson. And I'll shut up in a minute. Just final thing I want to say is maybe this is very reminiscent of Margaret Thatcher towards the end of her period as Prime Minister. The very famous scene when she went to Paris, when there was talk of leadership challenges, and she said, I will fight on and I will fight to win, and she was gone very soon.
Reminiscent, but their legacies might be slightly different.
No, absolutely. But in terms of the men in the grey suits coming for her over Europe,
Liam,
this
these
is
are the
where we are.
papers that she woke up to. Why aren't they appearing? But you've seen them all anyway. They are brutal, aren't they? Absolutely united against her. Yeah. Take us through the process of events that you expect to play out in the next 24 hours.
Well, I agree with Aisha. You know, the Conservative Party is the oldest continuously existing democratic party in the world. It is a machine to wield power here in the UK. And in these upcoming European elections in which we vote tomorrow, they're likely to come fifth. That's where we are. Nigel Farage's party has roared out of nowhere in the last 6 weeks. They're now well ahead in most opinion polls. As Aisha said, the men in grey suits in the Tory party, there are a few women, but they're mainly men still, are now going to take over. Because Farage is doing so well in the campaign before the European elections, the Tory party is now seriously concerned. If they muff up Brexit, to use a British phrase, then it's a sort of existential, you know, their survival is in question. So they want to get rid of May. They want a more Brexity leader. That probably means Boris Johnson. It may mean his young pretender, actually, the mentor of David Davis, the former Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, a trained lawyer.
I was going to say trained assassin.
Coming to the fore. The question is now, when these European elections go disastrously for the Conservative Party, and when Nigel Farage does really well, doing a lot better than he did in the 2014 European elections when he got 27% of the vote, he won those as well. I think it'll be nearer 40 this time. Will the Tories, the Conservative Party, and this Brexit Party do some kind of deal, have some kind of pact in order to get Brexit over the line. We're now in a position of extremes. Either we are going to leave the European Union without a deal, or we're going to have a second referendum. That's where we are.
Let's try for the papers again. I do want to show them because I think they're quite personal as well, don't you think, some of them, Nina? But this just shows how angry the nation has become, really, for all the papers to sort of really attack her. When we talk about the no deal and we talk about Boris Johnson, are we now in a situation where whoever her replacement is has to commit to a no deal?
I think that you'll definitely see the rhetoric around no deal being amped up because, as Liam correctly pointed out, the Brexit party is going to win the elections. Nigel Farage, who was the head of UKIP in 2014, or leading UKIP in 2014 in those European elections, got 27% of the vote. I think this time he'll get a few more points. I don't know if it's as much as 40, but about a third. He's going to win, okay? So the Tories are going to take that as a lesson of we have to out UKIP, and the only way... the Brexit party, the only way to do this is by amping up the rhetoric on no-deal Brexit. And this is where I think Liam and I differ, because Liam says that, you know, if it is PM Boris, he will be willing to pull that trigger and take the UK into no-deal Brexit territory. I'm not so certain he will, because I do think that if it is a no-deal Brexit, that is a seismic political shift. This is the country where people were literally calling the police when KFC ran out of chicken. So if it's a no-deal Brexit...
Brits can't handle it.
There will be consequences. You know, when there is no food in the supermarkets, do you honestly think that the electorate would be willing to forgive the Conservative Party for that? I think that will be a factor in his considerations right now. You know, he would be willing, I think, to realize that taking the UK into no-deal Brexit territory is a big risk potentially for the Tory party.
The other alternative, as Liam says, is this second referendum, but Boris isn't going to go for that.
Well, you say that. There have been quite a lot. There's been quite a lot of people speculating. So one of the theories is that Boris becomes Prime Minister. He probably doesn't want to make the same mistake that has really befallen two people that had the same kind of anointation beforehand, Gordon Brown and Theresa May. They were put in there by their party. They never put it back to the people until it was too late. So I think he'll want to have some sort of interaction with the public to anoint his position either as Prime Minister or on Brexit. So one of the things that is being mooted is that if he can get a deal with Nigel Farage on Brexit, he could risk a general election and he could possibly beat Jeremy Corbyn with the majority. But that is if he doubles down on a hard Brexit.
He needs Farage.
Absolutely. But if he's not clear on that, what he could do is have a second referendum, but put a WTO Brexit on the ballot paper.
The no-deal Brexit.
The no-deal Brexit. That is one of the options.
She's no Margaret Thatcher, says Madeleine, and Lusac says Brexit was a terrible idea from day one and should never have happened.
Correct.
What's interesting about this election, the European election...
I'm not going to rise today. I'm outnumbered.
For once. Welcome to my world.
This election, it's interesting, isn't it? When you say, does it necessarily empower Farage because it's turned into a referendum on Brexit, hasn't it? Because ultimately it doesn't actually mean anything if we're leaving the European Union.
No, I think it does empower Farage. I mean, it's... Look, to use a phrase I've used before on CNN Talk, to the outside world looking in, this is a miasma. This is a vortex of woe. If you're not confused, you don't really understand what's going on. This is extremely intricate. But this is the UK we're talking about. The world is watching. And if the UK successfully leaves the European Union and thrives, other countries may leave. So this is very, very important, not just for the UK, but for the European Union and for the world. Look, if Farage does win, it really is a seismic event. I think the Brexit Party is very different from UKIP. UKIP was very much a party that was designed to get Tory voters who thought the Tories weren't Eurosceptic enough. The Brexit Party, whatever you say about it, and it is still led by Farage, but it's positioned itself more in the centre of British politics, not on Brexit. It's very much wants a Brexit, but in terms of the candidates it's got more left-wing candidates. It's meant to be a broader church. And this guy, whatever you think of him, he is now the kingmaker in British politics. He's never been an MP. He's been an MEP, a member of the European Parliament for a long time. But he is now the kingmaker. I think we could end up, not with a second referendum. I think we could end up with a general election quite soon and if we do have a general election...
Would Boris back that?
I think he would, because if he gets this deal with Farage, as Aisha said, then the Tories could win. And if we did have another general election, I'd suggest, my colleagues may differ from me, I think the Parliament that comes back will be much more Brexity in that the MPs that get returned, a lot of the Remain MPs, certainly the Remain Conservative MPs, will be ousted by their constituencies.
What does that mean, though, in terms of process? So if there's going to be an election, who takes over from Theresa May if she steps down now? I mean, what do we see happening?
So I imagine you would first have the Tory leadership bid, which was going to take us all the way up to basically the fall.
So she'll be leading until the fall?
No. I think she'll go before that, but...
It can happen quite quickly. Well sorry,
okay,
you carry on.
So the Tory leadership will happen. You're going to see these candidates, try to out-Brexit one another. Lots of talk about leaving with no deal, renegotiating with the EU. And whilst all of this is happening, in the domestic arena, what's not happening is the talks with the EU are not going anywhere. Actually, they've been stalled since November last year.
They've been stalled since 2016.
Well, it's since 2016.
And the next deadline is October.
Next deadline is the end of October, right? October the 31st. So basically, once the new leader has been enthroned, I don't think we'd see an election before the deadline runs out or a second referendum. Perhaps they will promise the EU that they'll have an election or a second referendum, because I suspect, timestamp, whoever is the new Tory PM will ask the EU for an extension come the end of October.
Which they'd have to grant, wouldn't they, Aisha, considering the state of the...
Well, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a certain... I mean, I've got a slight disagreement on the timeline. I think that the Conservative Party will want to have quite a long run-in time for a leadership contest, because I think the Conservative Party is going through what the Labour Party went through in 2015, which is not... Yes, a lot of it is about Brexit, but it's also about the bigger ideological battle for the soul of the Conservative Party. So, for example, 2 nights ago, a whole set of more moderate Conservatives launched a platform under a One Nation Conservative banner. So they're trying to push for more centrist, middle-of-the-road conservatism. And then you've got, obviously, your Dominic Raabs and your Boris Johnsons, who are more to the right. They want a more traditional kind of grassroots, sort of, more sort of Tea Party type kind of Conservative Party. So I think what Theresa May will negotiate is to stay, a bit like David Cameron did, because it's very hard just to completely throw a caretaker Prime Minister in. She may say, look, I'll stay until the Tory Party conference. That would allow her to have a nice speech and a nice send-off at the Conservative conference, and that gives them a decent period of time to have a leadership contest. The other thing which is really important to note about leadership contests, there are currently, I counted last night, 17 people who have thrown their hat in the ring, and there will be
more. You're yet to declare.
Don't think that's quite my party. I know we've done this for 2 years. I don't think you've quite worked out where my leanings are. But quite a lot of those have no thought that they will win, but what they're trying to do is position themselves so that when the top guy gets the job, they get a job in the cabinet. So there's going to be a huge amount of manoeuvring. So forget Brexit. Everyone's going to be thinking about their own job.
All the Tories are going to be sent to a desert island. It's going to be the biggest reality TV show in the world.
Tragedy today, on a serious note, British steel, one of the most important industries, is set to collapse. Now, Brexit's not everything, but it is a part of it. So there's a lot of bad stuff going on. 25,000 jobs are on the line, and we're faffing around here in Westminster,
just to say,
all trying to get our own jobs in the Conservative Party.
Questions underway at the moment, and they're not talking about Brexit. What they are talking about is British steel.
Yeah, I thought that,
and obviously with Jeremy Corbyn there, it's obviously a huge issue for him. He wants to nationalise industries like that, right? Let's hear from Jeremy Corbyn, though, speaking yesterday. He was talking about why he can't support May's new plan.
No, we can't support this bill because it's basically a rehash of what was discussed before, and it doesn't make any fundamental moves on market alignment or the customs union, or indeed protection of rights, but particularly in relation to consumer rights and the quality of the food that we will eat in the future. There's also, of course, the question of the deliverability of it. The Prime Minister has already indicated she's going to leave office. Many of her own MPs have already said they cannot support the bill. I can't see how it can get through Parliament anyway. No, we'll not be supporting it.
Liam, this is the some of the highlights of the deal that came out yesterday. And absolutely, I mean, it's a very anticipated speech, wasn't it? We're all watching it, and it just felt like a disaster to everyone.
I agree with Corbyn in the sense that there's not much new in this that would make the Labour Party vote for it. Though, if we're honest, I don't think it's ungenerous to say the Labour Party were never going to support withdrawal agreement.
Whatever she moved on.
But there's enough in this, particularly the top bullet point there on a second referendum, to really give other Tories who've backed the deal in the past, like Boris Johnson, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, a get-out clause to not back it. Look, Aisha's completely right. British Steel is a very important company. World steel prices have plunged, and ordinarily that would be top of the news, front and centre for days in this country, an iconic British industry. We should also think about the European elections more broadly. I actually believe, while we're focused on Brexit, obviously, and we've chosen to talk about that today, I think come early next week when we meet up on Monday, we'll be talking about France. That's, we've had 27 successive weeks of big protests in France. We've got Marine Le Pen resurgent. If Macron gets properly beaten by Le Pen, I mean, he is really the standard bearer for the European Union in its current guise. He is looking to inherit the crown of leader of the European Union, political leader, from Merkel in Germany as she steps down. So I personally think the biggest headlines after these results come out on Sunday will be written in French.
Christopher on Facebook says he's very glad he emigrated to Australia.
We're very glad for him. We're jealous of him.
Come on over.
Yeah, save us the space.
Make up the spare room.
Three.
Get the food on out, Chris. We're heading over.
Meanwhile,
prawn on the barbie.
we'll continue monitoring Prime Minister's questions for you, and the fact that Brexit isn't being discussed is quite extraordinary to some people, but not surprising to those in Westminster. Nina, do you think it will be about France, the election, or Italy, or...?
No, I think it's going to be more nuanced. Obviously, the kind of anti-EU, anti-establishment parties are going to do well, right? They did well in 2014. They're going to continue that trend. The European elections have traditionally always been a magnet for the protest parties. They've got a third of the seats in the European Parliament. Let me finish making my point. And they'll probably get a bit more than that. But the other thing, whilst that is the headline that everyone is picking up on, and I agree that France is a really dangerous situation. It's a tinderbox waiting to be set alight. But actually, the bigger story is the centre cannot hold, right? So just as voters are flocking to parties on the right, they're doing so on the left as well. You don't hear those stories. Just as many people voting for environmental parties, the Greens. It's the splintering of the centre and middle ground. But all of those far right parties or anti-establishment, anti-EU parties, when they come into the European Parliament, they don't work often together as a bloc. Nonetheless, they're going to have enough numbers to really make things difficult on things like budget negotiations and things like that.
Brenda's wondering what David Cameron thinks of the mess that he left behind.
Well, he's about to publish a book called For the Record.
For the Record, yeah.
He's coming out of his man shed. He's going to...
Shepherd's Hut.
Shepherd's Hut.
Shepherd's is going to be like...
They are talking about Brexit at PMQ, so we can go to that. Prime Minister under huge amounts of political pressure today, taking questions in the House. Let's listen in.
The decision on a second referendum, which I continue to believe would not be the right route for this country to go down. We should deliver on the first referendum before suggesting anything about a second.
Ian Blackford! My goodness, talk about ignoring reality. Prime Minister, look at the benches behind you. The Prime Minister is fooling no one but herself. And the truth, Mr. Speaker, is that the people of Scotland don't want her deal. Her own party doesn't want her deal. And now even the pro-Brexit Labour front bench won't support her deal. Her time is up. Tomorrow, people in Scotland have a choice. To send a message, to send pro-European, outward-looking Scottish National Party MEP MPs to Brussels to stop Brexit. Prime Minister, what party does she think the people of Scotland will choose?
Prime Minister! There is only one party in Scotland guaranteeing no more referendums, and that's the Conservative Party.
James EP!
Thank you, sir.
Colleagues,
Calm yourselves. Dignity, restraint. Let's hear Mr. Heapy.
Thank you, sir. My constituent, Jackie Luxon, was 26 weeks pregnant at the time of a car crash that caused her baby to be stillborn. However, only the injuries caused to Mrs. Luxon and their older daughter were relevant when charging and subsequently sentencing the driver whose dangerous driving caused the crash.
So that is Prime Minister's questions. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you're an expert on PMQs, but Brexit isn't, and her leadership isn't making more of a splash.
Well, if you think about Prime Minister's questions, it is when you're asking the questions as leader of the opposition, it's like a game of chess, and that was my job for sort of, many, many years, like prepping the leaders of oppositions and the Prime Ministers for PMQs. You have to ask questions sometimes in quite a defensive way. So because Labour is not doing brilliantly on Brexit either, people are very confused about Labour's position. The leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, has come under a lot of criticism for people deserting him because of his ambiguity on his positions. He is not going to ask a question when everybody can turn around and kind of slam it back to him. So when the art of Prime Minister's questions is picking topics where they can't attack you back. So something like steel is a very good issue for Jeremy Corbyn to go on. It's an incredibly important strategic industrial strategy for this country. 25,000 jobs and 25,000 families on the line. It's bread and butter, all-time religion for the Labour Party. They want to nationalise. So in a way, you can see why he's gone in there. But that question from Ian Blackford was very interesting. Ian Blackford is the leader of the Scottish National Party. And one of the unintended consequences of Brexit is going to be that the thirst for Scottish independence is on the rise. I go back to Scotland a lot. I know people who were absolutely passionate about staying in the Union in 2014. They are so appalled with how Westminster is not listening to them. And remember, Scotland was a Remain nation. They are now thinking, you know what, we want to break away.
Split from the other union. I never understand that logic.
No. But that's how people feel. A lot of people in Scotland feel so remote from Westminster. In fact, they feel the same ire that a lot of people feel against the EU. They feel they're not being listened to. Scotland is a proud country in its own right, and they feel that they're not being listened to.
We do have this statement, though, from Theresa May, don't we, which will come after Prime Minister's questions. So all the focus, presumably, on her leadership and her deal will come then?
I think that's right. I agree with Aisha. Jeremy Corbyn actually looks grown up to go on British Steel when Brexit's seen as such a Westminster bubble thing. Everybody's sick of it, whether they voted for Leave or Remain.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And for Corbyn to stand up and talk about steel makes him look good. Look, I don't want the union of the UK and Scotland to break up at all, and that's one reason I don't want a second referendum on Brexit, because then you're much more likely to get a second referendum in Scotland. We had one that was won decisively by, no to Scottish devolution. Aisha knows Scotland a lot better than I ever will, having grown up there and going there a lot more than I do. What I would say, though, is there's also quite a strong Leave vote in Scotland. More people voted Leave in Scotland in the 2016 referendum on the European Union membership than voted SNP, Ian Blackford's party, in the 2017 election. So it isn't quite as clear cut. Though I do agree.
60%.
60%. Yeah.
Though I do agree. But since then, the SNP have become less popular. That's my point, because they haven't.
But the issue
they
of
haven't governed very well.
I'd like to present you the word cloud from the comments feeding through on Facebook. The question was about the referendum, so that's why it's appearing in a big way. Do we see anything else there emerging?
Second.
Divided.
No.
Yeah.
Crying emoji.
The sad face and Leave.
The crying, the sad emoji
Divided.
I
really
think
stands
all
out.
round people are sad, right?
A really important point to make for international viewers who aren't necessarily following, every single, all the trials and tribulations of this debate is that essentially the UK has three choices, right? It's either Theresa May's deal, no deal, or no Brexit. And you can have a second referendum, you can have a general election, which is obfuscation, perhaps it changes the parliamentary arithmetic, but in the end, it has to be one of those three.
I agree.
And if you look at the parliamentary figures right now, there's no majority for any of them. So perhaps if there's a general election, the arithmetic shifts.
Well, the only thing there was a parliamentary majority for was no deal.
a parliamentary majority to prevent a no deal.
Exactly.
To prevent a no deal, but no parliamentary majority for.
There was also a
no
parliamentary majority for the Malthouse Convention, which was Theresa May's deal without the Irish backstop.
Yeah, but come on. That's kind of like saying there's a parliamentary majority to leave and maintain everything that we want without paying any of the
I disagree, but carry on.
No. I mean, the EU has been unequivocal about this, and if you talk to any of the negotiators or any other European nation, it's just not on the table. We can disagree, but I think the Malthouse Compromise is one of the most ludicrous ideas that has been floated, and it will come back. So I don't think whatever happens, you will actually see a parliamentary majority to trigger a no-deal Brexit. Therefore, if Theresa May's deal doesn't pass and Brexiteers are amongst those who keep voting it down, you may just end up in this kind of limbo where the UK is meant to be leaving, but actually never leaves.
So you have summed that up brilliantly. And basically, we are no further forward than we were on the morning of the vote in 2016. It is astonishing to have burnt through all this time, and we are exactly back at square one.
Jeff on Facebook says, if we don't like the results of the next general election, can we have a second vote?
Yes, you can in 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think a second referendum, when you haven't implemented the first, is a disaster for mature democracy. A disaster for society.
But yet the Prime Minister can get 4 attempts at trying to put a failed bill for
Parliament votes.
through.
It's there to vote.
It's like,
and Megumi saying May has a strong heart. So there's actually, some sympathy for Theresa May. It's the amount of pressure she's been under, but also a huge amount of criticism
I
as well.
don't have that much sympathy for
Having
her.
Aisha next to me.
Sorry.
Thank you for watching. Listen again on Apple iTunes by looking up See It on Talk.